I call to order the October 28th regular business meeting of Waynesboro City Council. I would like to welcome everyone in attendance this evening, and I would like to ask Mr. Allen if he would please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. For those in attendance this evening, if you wish to speak at the scheduled public hearing or during citizen comment period, please sign up on the appropriate sheet in the back of chambers. Item 2 is the adoption of the meeting agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second?
No second.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any discussion? All in favor, please, of adopting the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the agenda is adopted, 5-0. Let's see. Item 3 is matters from mayor. I would like to invite forward our Waynesboro Fire Department Battalion Chief, David Nichols. He has asked for an opportunity for he and his daughter Samantha to briefly address City Council tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Williams and members of City Council. And tonight I appear before you not as a city employee, but as a private citizen. But I do work for the City Fire Department in the Fire Marshal's office. And, obviously, that's my connection to city government here in Waynesboro. This is my daughter Samantha, and Samantha's a school teacher at the Waynesboro High School. And my wife and Sam's mom back there, she also works for Waynesboro. So the whole family's here. But the reason that we're here tonight is I just wanted to take an opportunity to kind of thank the members of the Waynesboro City and, just a number of departments, and I'll kind of preface, with why we're here tonight. Our family, we have a very close family, and as you can tell that we're all have worked in government. I've worked in government my whole adult life. Denise has been a teacher for most of her adult life since we've been together, and Samantha went to college to be a teacher, and she's been a teacher since she graduated college. But on May 31st of this year, our family, had a huge change in just our normal way of life, and our daughter Samantha was admitted to Augusta Health. She got sick, and she was admitted to the hospital, and she spent 7 days at Augusta Health, and they didn't know what was going on. They really couldn't tell. They did a bunch of tests. They all came back either negative or inconclusive, so they told us we needed to go to UVA, where they have more extensive capabilities. And we went to UVA, and on June the 10th, she was admitted at UVA. And she spent a total of 43 days in the hospital this summer. Basically, her whole summer vacation as a teacher was taken up. But after a number of days at UVA, she received some devastating news on June the 28th. At 28 years old, she was diagnosed with gastric cancer. And it devastated our family. It devastated us as parents, and obviously Samantha as an individual. But from the time Samantha went to the hospital to the time till today and continuing, there has been just an outpouring of support for me as an individual, for my wife, and for our daughter and our family. And that's why we're here tonight. So, we didn't know what was going on, but through it all, there were so many people who stepped up and offered support and just provided prayers, and just gave me personally. And I've been in government 39 years of my adult life, and I've never had that type of support before. And kudos to our people here. And most of them did it because it's part of their job, yes, but they did it because they care, and that's the most important part. So, Sammy, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, along with all of this individual support, we also received support from a lot of groups here in Waynesboro. Specifically, we had an event, the softball tournament between the police, the fire, and the rescue squad, and that event pulled together some donations and support for me, but also it was just a great event to feel the support in person from all of the, not just the people in those leadership roles, but also their family, their kids, their wives and husbands, and it was a really, really warm day, and it was so great to see from everybody around us.
So personally, I would like to recognize Fire Chief Andrew Holloway. Andrew's been a friend. I knew Andrew before I came to work for the city, but Andrew's been a friend, and obviously he's been my boss at work, but Andrew was just phenomenal. So I want to give a shout out to Andrew. Deputy Chief George Fitzgerald, again, just you do what you need to do to take care of your family, and everything else will get taken care of. So those two individuals. The members of the fire department, A shift, B shift, C shift. As you know, we have these 3 rotating shifts, and sometimes we don't see people for several days, but when people would come back from the long breaks, they would stop in. How's Samantha doing? How are you doing? How's your wife doing? So just the outpouring of support was just amazing. Waynesboro First Aid Crew Director Steve Ward and the crew members, again, checking in to see how I'm doing personally. The police department, Chief Dave Shaw is here tonight. The police department, I work very closely with the police department. My role is a fire marshal. And again, they've got great people over there, and just people, just wanting to know and making sure we're okay and being there for us. Gary Kreitzer with Emergency Management, again, just another great person and staff over there. Mr. Ham, I had a couple of opportunities to talk to him one-on-one, and thank you for all the support and kind words that you provided. Mike Wilhelm, same thing. Todd Wood, I ran into Todd one day on the street. We were grabbing lunch together, and he kind of listened. He gave me a couple minutes just to talk and just talk about what was going on. It was a great listener, so thank you. And I've spent several times in Mike's office just talking about it. The folks in HR, when I needed to know something about FMLA or the benefits that I have as a city employee, they were there. And they also provided some information for Samantha. Christy Ryman, who works for the schools in HR, Christy did a fantastic job, and she's helped us through a lot. She's helped us with some insurance issues. And so, again, just those people by name. Staff members at the high school, I don't want to call them out because some of them obviously are currently going through cancer treatment or cancer survivors, but so many people that have gone through the cancer journey and pathway reached out to us and came to our house and spent time with us, spent time with Samantha, and they continue to support Samantha. Although not a city employee, Dr. Scott Woogan, he was Samantha's doctor at Augusta Health, and continues to follow her to this day. And I reach out to him on a weekly basis and give him updates, and his staff over at Augusta Health. Dr. Ian Crane was her attending doctor when she was in the hospital at UVA. So again, all these people in our community that have been there for us. The folks at the Emily Kerr Cancer Center at UVA, again, this was devastating news, but since we got that news, it's been a journey that has been both difficult and challenging, but also rewarding because we're making progress. And she's doing better, as you can see. She's standing here. My daughter could not eat for almost 4 months because of this type of cancer she had. She started eating again. To watch your child eat again is like taking their first steps or saying their first words. I came home one day and watched her eat. It was so great. It was great. I went back to work, and I was so happy, and I was going around telling everybody. So, but Sammy mentioned the softball tournament. Benji Smith, one of our firefighters, Benji was the organizer, and he put that together. And he came to me and he said, "We're doing this softball tournament. We're doing the Battle of the Badges. We've done it in the past years, and we try to choose a local recipient in the community to help out." And they collectively chose our daughter Samantha to help her with some of her outstanding medical bills. So thank you to Benji and all the people who came out that day. So again, the goal is for Samantha to get back to work here in January and get back to teaching. She still has a long road ahead of her, but we celebrated her 29th birthday a week ago tonight. And in June and July, when we were going through this, we didn't know if we were going to make her birthday. So getting to her 29th birthday was just so much. So again, I just think it's important to thank all those people that were there for us and let you know and let the staff know how much I appreciate it, my family appreciates, my daughter appreciates it. So thank you for everything that you do and you've done for us.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry what your family has gone through. Happy birthday. I'm glad things are so much better. I'm so grateful to live in a city where folks lift one another up during our toughest trials. Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have two more things to add, and I'm trying to be brief. Our Chief of Police, David Shaw, sent out the following message regarding National First Responders Day, and I would like to share that with you. Today is National First Responders Day. Specifically, it recognizes first responders across the U.S. who respond to emergencies while risking their own lives and safety to help and protect others. It takes a special person to fulfill these roles, and even more to sustain the commitment, dedication, and personal sacrifice for the betterment of the safety of our communities, and we appreciate everything each of you do to fulfill this vital role. Thank you for that letter, and thank you for all of our first responders. We are so grateful. I think we have some of the best. Okay, and then I just have one more thing, and then I'll move on through the agenda. Over the course of the past few weeks, I've been contacted by citizens concerned about the recent lawsuit regarding the certification of the upcoming November election. The lawsuit involves the Board of Elections, over which the City Council has no control. Although the city is not a party to or involved in the lawsuits, the city is confident that the voting machines are legal and every resident's vote will be counted and certified. The lawsuit does not affect anyone's right to vote or effect of that vote. Residents should not allow the lawsuit to discourage them from voting, and the City Council encourages all residents to vote. Okay. Item 4 is matters from city council members.
We'll just get two things, Madam Mayor. Just the first is just to echo and maybe to build on that a bit. I've also, I think a number of us have probably received phone calls or inquiries about the lawsuit and alike. And I came up with this example. I think it's a pretty good example of if anyone needs encouragement and confidence in the security and the integrity of our elections, you don't have to look a whole lot further than these 5 individuals up here who all got elected with the same voting machines, the same procedures, the same ballots, the same certification process, and we are all 5 uniquely different individuals. So I have confidence, you should have confidence. The next item that I just wanted to share is last weekend before last, had the opportunity to represent the city again at the Virginia Municipal League Conference. This year I had the privilege of serving as the legislative chair, and where we not only identified our 4 priorities for this upcoming legislative session, and just to hit the high points of supporting public education, funding for the community service boards and behavioral health needs, state assistance to local police departments, and land use control. More excitingly is that we had the opportunity to actually identify patrons to carry all of these bills into the upcoming session. So just wanted to acknowledge that work and that work of that organization.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Just follow up on what you all said. I agree. I have complete faith in our registrar and our staff in the registrar's office. The machines, I couldn't have said it better than the way Terry did. I mean, I think one of the perfect examples of trusting these machines, we had recently a challenged vote in the 5th district, I believe is right. And the votes came out in the recount the same as they were in the original count. So to me, that is proof in the pudding there that we have a very trustworthy system. And this was done by two individuals in our city for whatever reason. It's their reasons, it's
Right.
their opinions, but I have faith in the machines and our staff.
Okay, thank you so much. Anybody else? Okay. Item 5 is to consideration of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the consent agenda passes 5-0. That brings us to item 6, and that is to present a proclamation to Mark and Tracy Holmes recognizing their work to preserve the red brick house, and I've asked Mr. Wood to read that, please.
It's signed by the mayor, but on behalf of all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Whereas the red brick house at 1017 New Hope Road in Waynesboro, Virginia was built circa 1820. Since 1955, the property was used mostly as a residential rental until it fell into disrepair. Whereas at the encouragement of citizens in May of 2016, the city council voted to transfer ownership of the property to the newly formed Red Brick House Committee, formed to save the house from demolition, and whereas the Red Brick House Committee worked tirelessly to overcome the zoning obstacles that delayed making the plan to save the home a reality, and whereas after securing the site rezoning, the Red Brick House Committee then transferred the property to Mr. Mark Holmes, owner of a contracting company, the Wood Board, who undertook plans to renovate the 19th century red brick house, also known as the Arnold House. And whereas due to Mr. and Mrs. Holmes' untiring efforts and hard work, the red brick house is on its way to becoming a beautiful and welcome extension of Waynesboro's historical renaissance. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals like Mr. and Mrs. Holmes in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped the city of Waynesboro and us as a people. And whereas Waynesboro encourages the preservation and active use of historic structures to enhance the city's quality of life, economic vibrancy, and environmental sustainability, and now, therefore, it be proclaimed that the Waynesboro City Council honor Mr. and Mrs. Mark and Tracy Holmes for their tireless efforts and dedication to preserving, beautifying, and honoring an important part of Waynesboro's past and future. Signed by Lana Williams, Mayor, City of Waynesboro.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wood. I'd like to also thank the Historic Commission for requesting this proclamation. Thank you, Shanda, for reaching out and providing some of the words. I would like to invite Mark and Tracy forward if they would like to receive this and maybe say a few words, and then the rest of council can also join us in the picture. We'll go ahead and present this, and if you would like to add a few words. Would you like to stop here behind them? Or
Would you
down
like
with
to-
me?
Come over and get in the picture, Mr. Lee. Hold on, we're trying to make it a better frame here.
Oh, hold on, before you do that, I need one more person. I need my camera. Because without you, this would not be here.
Slide on in here.
Let's look at Sheila's and first, and then we'll look at Greg's. Got it? Thank you so much. If you'd like to say.
Years ago, I came in here with this brick, and I have to thank Mike Hemp because after trying to get the Red Brick House Committee to be able to save the house and not coming up with a plan, it was way beyond time to go ahead and get rid of it. But Mike listened to me, gave me the opportunity for, some of you were here at that time, some of you weren't, to try and save that house. They always say, be careful what you wish for because you might just get it. And getting that house has been the most challenging thing that I've ever had to do in my life, but also most rewarding. One of the days we were working on the house, the backside of the house literally was rotted out where it didn't touch the foundation. And I had this lady come in who was literally crying. And this is Beverly Bush. And she said, thank God you are saving this house. Finding out from her that her ancestor, David and Mary Bush, are buried about 150 feet from the house. They originally sold the land, which was part of their farm, to William Brown, who was a War of 1812 veteran. He built this structure to be a schoolhouse originally. It became Masonic meeting hall for this city's Masonic Lodge. It became a hospital during the Civil War. It was part of the Battle of Waynesboro. And it is
taught me that this house is not just the history of this house. It's the history of Waynesboro. Meeting people like Ted Campbell, who came by while I was working on the front of the house and said, I was born in that front room. And hearing all the stories, meeting the milkman who showed us where the milk box was, and literally meeting probably half of the city of Waynesboro who all drove by to say, thank you for saving this. And all of these great people and all of the history and things, most people when they would ride by and see a building like this, look at it as a derelict piece of trash that should be torn down. There's so much history with the city of Waynesboro at its changing point right now, the inflection, that if you don't know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going. So we are doing a brick historic walkway. So this is a new brick because you guys are part of the history of saving this house. And what we're doing is we're trying to raise money to get this house put on the National Registry. The walkway will start out with decade bricks that have significant events for each decade. We have another row which will be history of everybody who's owned that house and all the history that's happened with it. And then there's a row that's a history of Waynesboro. Everything from the Iron Cross of the railroads to the Crozet Tunnel to the flood downtown. And this is what needs to be made sure that we don't lose the past. And I thank all of you all for listening to me rambling on because my wife literally says I can talk to a brick wall. And usually do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Greg, for always keeping us updated on all of the new renovations. We really appreciate Waynesboro.com because I followed the transformation of that house through that site. I'd also like to tell anybody that came here for the proclamation or anything else and you would like to leave, I mean, you're more than welcome to stay for the entire meeting, but you're also free to go as well. I won't be offended. Okay, item 7 is to receive a presentation from the Knowledge Advisory Group Incorporated regarding the regional opioid assessment and abatement strategies, and I'd like to call on Mr. Ham.
Yes, ma'am. The cities of Waynesboro, Stanton, along with the County of Augusta, have undertaken a regional assessment focused on opioid use and treatment services in the region.
Craig?
The three entities engaged the Knowledge Advisory Group to conduct the study and identify strategies to abate and prevent opioid use in the region. Study is funded by a grant from the Commonwealth's Opioid Abatement Authority. Resulting abatement services and programs will be funded by allocations from the opioid settlement funds and from additional allocations and or grants from the Commonwealth. This evening, representatives from the Knowledge Advisory Group will present a summary of their findings. Subsequent to this evening's presentation, the regional representatives will form strategies and recommendations regarding programming that we'll bring back to the individual and respective elected bodies. So with that, I'd like to welcome our friends from the Knowledge Advisory Group. These ladies have presented to Stanton and Augusta County previously, so we're third in the package of presenting the results. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you to the City Council and to Waynesboro City government officials for inviting us to be with you here today. My name is Trina Willard, and I am the owner of a company called Knowledge Advisory Group, and we're from the Richmond area, and I'm here with my colleague Sharina Gibson this evening, who's with the Carter Foundation, who we partnered with on this project. So I'd like to begin by sharing a brief overview on the project. Having a little bit of technical difficulty. Okay. Great, thank you. Technology. All right, the City of Stanton, Augusta County, and the City of Waynesboro have conducted this needs assessment as part of their planning for the use of funds from the National Opioid Settlement. These funds may be used for programs designed to treat, prevent, or reduce opioid use disorder or the misuse of opioids. To describe this a bit more, opioid misuse can include taking more than the prescribed dose or taking it more often, using opioids to get high, or taking someone else's opioids. The risk of opioid use disorder, which is sometimes referred to as opioid dependence or addiction, is higher when opioids are misused. And common prescription opioids include OxyContin, Percocet, morphine, methadone, codeine, and fentanyl. In December 2023, the City of Waynesboro contracted with Knowledge Advisory Group and our partner, the Carter Foundation, to conduct a needs assessment to plan for opioid abatement efforts in Stanton City, Augusta County, and Waynesboro City. Needs assessments are typically the first step when government entities or other institutions must make decisions about how to use funding or provide services in their communities. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. So this project has been guided by an advisory committee with one local government representative from each of the localities that comprise the Saw region. And this assessment was funded by a planning grant from the Opioid Abatement Authority. You'll hear me refer to that as the OAA as well. The OAA was established by the Virginia General Assembly in 2021 to abate and remediate the opioid epidemic in the Commonwealth through financial support from the Opioid Abatement Fund. The fund supports efforts to treat, prevent, and reduce opioid use disorder and the misuse of opioids in the Commonwealth. The financial assets in the fund result from settlements and other court orders relating to legal cases regarding the manufacturing, marketing, distribution, or sale of opioids, as well as other sources such as gifts and donations. Now, needs assessments include gathering information across a variety of sources to understand the conditions in a community. And in that regard, we've taken a number of steps to collect insights. The consulting team initiated this project by conducting background research on evidence-based strategies to address opioid misuse and interviewing subject matter experts from 10 organizations in the Saw region to determine the needs and resources available to individuals who misuse opioids. And those included the Community Services Board, the Regional Jail, Augusta Health, the Office on Youth, Blue Ridge Court Services, as well as others. This information was used to identify critical issues to explore further on a survey that was distributed to a broader group of community stakeholders. And our assessment also includes a review of published community health data and opioid abatement resources for the Saw localities. We then shared our preliminary findings and recommendations in 2 town hall meetings with residents and 1 town hall meeting with community health professionals and other relevant stakeholders to collect additional feedback before finalizing our report. So today I'm sharing some of the information we've gathered with you, including thoughts, opinions, and experiences from professionals and community residents. Our goal was to better understand how opioid use has impacted residents in the area, the resources that currently exist to address opioid use, and gaps in services to address opioid use. So I'll begin with our first finding. In reviewing data that was available from the Virginia Department of Health, we found that 2 of the localities within the Saw region, Stanton and Waynesboro specifically, are classified by VDH as high need for targeted drug prevention and treatment support compared to other localities across the state. You can see that on the slide here. While the scoring method that they use is not specific to opioids, there's other evidence to suggest that opioids are one of the drugs misused by residents. For example, Augusta and Waynesboro residents had a higher rate of women giving birth with opioid disorders and higher rates of emergency responses to opioid-related events compared to Virginia overall. In addition, Waynesboro had a higher opioid death rate compared to the statewide rate. In addition, some representatives we interviewed also mentioned that methamphetamines was the most significant drug-related issue in the region, but opioid use, particularly involving fentanyl, is also rising. And among those who responded to our survey, 65% described opioid misuse as a significant problem in the Saw region, and 93% indicated they had known someone who struggles with opioid misuse in the Saw region. In addition, relatively poor economic conditions in the Saw region may contribute to opioid misuse among its residents. Research suggests that poverty increases addiction risk factors, such as stress, feelings of hopelessness, low self-esteem, decreased social support, and decreased access to affordable health care. A review of published data suggests that residents in the Saw region may be particularly vulnerable to addiction due to economic conditions in this area of the state. For example, as you can see on this slide, the median household income in Augusta County, the city of Stanton, and the city of Waynesboro are lower than the median income for Virginia overall. Poverty rates in the cities of Stanton and Waynesboro are both higher than the statewide rate, although the poverty rate is slightly lower in Augusta County. The percentage of households in which housing costs are more than 30% of total household income is also higher in the cities of Stanton and Waynesboro as compared to Virginia overall. We also found that residents of the Saw region have access to fewer mental health and primary care providers compared to Virginia overall, which likely makes it more difficult for those with substance use disorders, including opioid misuse, to obtain help from trained professionals. To share a bit of information about this, the mental health provider rate, which includes psychiatrists, psychologists, licensed clinical social workers, counselors, etc., was substantially lower in Waynesboro and Augusta County compared to the statewide rate. In addition, the primary care physician rate was lower in Augusta and Stanton compared to the statewide rate. Individuals we interviewed also mentioned there are too few providers in the region, and the lack of providers affects the timeliness of treatment. When asked to identify the types of programs needed to address opioid misuse in the region from a list of evidence-based strategies, community stakeholders selected recovery support services more often than any other option. Recovery supports are non-clinical services, meaning that they're not usually provided by a medical professional, and they assist families and individuals to recover and stabilize from alcohol and drug problems. So those could include things like drug-free housing, self-help and mutual support groups, child care, case management, employment counseling and support, and peer support and peer providers. Other common responses to this question included programs for children whose parents misuse opioids, behavioral therapies, and harm reduction strategies. Additionally, this slide shows the most common barriers to obtaining services for opioid misuse. These responses came from a stakeholder survey. You can see that the barriers noted most often were lack of awareness about services and treatment programs, transportation, and lack of available services and treatment programs. And a few other barriers were noted as well, such as cost, stigma of substance use problems, lack of internet access for telehealth options, and language barriers. And now I wanted to mention one additional topic that came up frequently, and that's the topic of prevention programs, specifically with regards to opioid misuse. According to community stakeholders, opioid misuse prevention programs are somewhat available in the Saw region, but they only mentioned a few light touch programs available from the Office on Youth and the Valley CSB when asked to identify them. So as an example, a light touch program could be something like a presentation on substance use issues that's offered once a year and provided by the schools. So those slides provide both statistics and feedback regarding the prevalence and the risk in the region. And at this point, I'd like to share our recommendations for funding priorities to address opioid misuse, which are grounded in those findings. So I'll discuss each of these primary recommendations today. Please note that there are additional recommendations in the report that may be considered that we won't detail tonight due to time. However, we believe that these 5 are appropriate priorities for pursuing OAA funding. So we'll start with recommendation 1, which speaks directly to the infrastructure of providers in the region. As I noted earlier, there's a lack of mental health care providers according to published data and stakeholders. The lower rates of mental health providers and primary care physicians among residents in the region is a factor that could make it difficult for those who are misusing opioids to access the professional help they need. Although this problem is not unique to the Saul region, stakeholders indicated that the primary barrier to the recruitment of providers is low pay and low Medicaid reimbursement rates. To address this barrier, it may be helpful to identify incentives for providers to practice in the area or pursue grant opportunities that focus on shortages of behavioral health professionals in rural communities, such as a recent RFP that was issued by the Foundation for Opioid Response Efforts in June of 2024. With that, let's talk about the service gap that came up most frequently, which was recovery support services. So our second recommendation is to expand recovery support services for opioid misuse. Community stakeholders selected recovery support services more often than any other option from a list of evidence-based services that are eligible under OAA funding. So as a reminder, recovery supports are non-clinical services, meaning they're not usually provided by a medical professional, and they do assist families and individuals to recover and stabilize from alcohol and drug problems. Although our community resource inventory indicates several of these types of programs do exist, it's unclear how many of them have the capacity to serve residents that need them. Let's turn to the second most recommended service. About 69% of community stakeholders identified programs for children whose parents misuse opioids as a priority for implementation or expansion in the region. In fact, no one we spoke to was able to identify any family intervention services specifically for opioid misuse. So another recommendation is to expand programs for children whose parents misuse opioids. Now, specific programs that would fill this gap while satisfying conditions for funding from the OAA include those that address the needs of pregnant or parenting women with opioid use disorder and any co-occurring substance use disorder or mental health condition and the needs of their families, including infants with neonatal abstinence syndrome, through evidence-based or evidence-informed methods, programs, or strategies. We also had a conversation with the OAA over the course of this project. They also indicated that kinship navigation services to support family members who step in to take care of children when their parents are undergoing substance use treatment would also be an allowable use of the funding. Now, because prevention programs for youth appear to be very limited in the Saul region, we also have a recommendation to expand opioid misuse prevention and education efforts. According to community stakeholders, opioid misuse prevention programs are not readily available. We also heard a very compelling story from a community resident during one of our town halls whose son had passed away after using fentanyl. Her family had never heard of the drug when this happened. Evidence-based interventions that could be considered are available from initiatives such as the Blueprints for Healthy Youth Development, which is a project within the Institute of Behavioral Science at the University of Colorado Boulder. One example of an intervention identified by this organization as a model program is the Project Towards No Drug Abuse, which is a high school classroom-based drug prevention program that aims to prevent teen drinking, smoking, marijuana use, and other hard drug use. Other model programs to consider may be identified through the Office of the Surgeon General. And although not identified as priorities on the community stakeholder survey, harm reduction programs, detoxification and crisis center services, and inpatient treatment were identified as priorities by town hall meeting participants. Now, some harm reduction programs do exist in the region, including Narcan and Narcan trainings that are available through the Valley CSB and the Central Shenandoah Health District, although more of these programs may be needed to meet the demand. In addition, efforts are currently underway to build a detoxification and crisis center in the region, but additional funding is needed to expand upon this project. And while the lack of inpatient substance use treatment in the region was mentioned as a priority by town hall participants, the total cost to build and sustain that type of project is likely beyond the scope of OAA funding and would require additional investments by local government and in the region that they may not be available. So those are the primary recommendations we have for you this evening. As I mentioned, there are additional recommendations in the report, but these are the top priorities that we identified that would be in alignment with the OAA funding. So with that, that's all the information I have to share, and I'd be happy to address any questions along with my colleague.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have one question. You mentioned the substance use disorder providers. So was there any collaboration or discussion, or is Augusta Medical part of that stakeholders that you mentioned?
They were. Augusta Health was involved in the process throughout.
Okay, and so did they have any kind of way ahead in terms of addressing the lack of providers?
I think that it's certainly a challenge. It's not only a challenge in this community, but it is a challenge in most rural communities. Some of the recommendations that we shared with regards to seeking out grant programs that are specifically focused on attracting providers to rural communities was one piece of the recommendation. And the challenge that's wrapped around is the low pay rate and the low Medicaid reimbursement rate. So that is a big issue to address. So they were definitely very invested and involved in trying to develop strategies to address that issue.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Just a question, just the numbers guy, related to the stakeholder surveys. So the average number, or the number of respondents that participated in the stakeholder survey, what were those numbers?
Sharina, do you have those handy? I have 45 in my mind, but
Yeah, well, I'll hit you up on that while you're looking that up.
Sure.
Of some fixed figure, right, of
Excuse me?
stakeholder, some fixed figure relative to the survey respondents.
yes.
So there were open houses also
Town halls.
provided, town halls also provided. Are those totals summarized in the report as well?
They are. The number of participants in the town halls, yes, those
Okay.
are in the report. Mhm.
And how were those respondents identified for their participation?
The town hall participants?
Both.
For the stakeholders and the town hall participants. So for the stakeholder survey, we worked with the representatives of each county government and created a list. And then we had those, the survey was distributed to that broader list. We tried to be very diverse in terms of the agencies that we reached out to, and invited multiple people from those agencies, actually asked individuals to distribute it within the agencies as well. So it included a wide array of organizations across the 3 localities. And of course, some of those organizations are joint efforts across the 3 localities. So that's the process for the stakeholder survey. It was also sent out in emails, distributed to staff in those agencies as well. And then for the town halls, there was sort of a multi-pronged process there. One is that it was advertised through the social media channels. I believe it was also on the websites, if I'm not mistaken, Mike. And that was also distributed through the provider agencies. So it was published for client populations to also be aware of the town halls and to participate in that way. So a couple different avenues.
Okay. Yeah, because I am very curious, maybe we could talk offline.
Sure.
Relative to the distribution of the results, specifically for the survey, because I'm curious about service organizations being, how they're responding, and I'd be curious about the association from stigma, right, as just having, knowing folks that have suffered with addiction, and that stigma association, if there was a cross-pollination with the other responses, that, and the truth of the matter is that the stigma may be the driving reason that may influence the co-responses. So we could talk offline.
Sure.
Curious.
Absolutely, yes. Stigma certainly was one of the barriers that was raised by the community stakeholders, and it is a challenge to address. We did try to extend the invitations through multiple channels, and also asked providers to invite individuals to those town halls. There were certainly some community residents that did participate in the town hall process, and we had some very compelling feedback from them, I think, and that contributed to the report.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the report. Any other questions? No? Okay. So no action is requested. This evening, staff will return with recommendations for the next step. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Item 8 is to hold a public hearing and consider introducing an ordinance granting a conditional use permit to allow townhouses in the HB Highway Business Zoning District at 0 King Avenue, tax map number 261-E. Melvin L. Garrison III, applicant for Kenneth Cook Revocable Trust. And I will call on Ms. Tate, our Director of Community Development.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. This evening is a scheduled public hearing for conditional use permit 24-18 for townhouse residential development in our Highway Business District at 0 King Avenue. If you'll remember, the original request was tabled by council in June of this year, and that request was exclusively to develop the property for residential use for townhouses, approximately 79, on the 9.47 acre parcel. Prior to the tabling of that request, the Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on that original request in May, and they did recommend approval of the application. In June, when council tabled the request, there were some concerns cited specifically about using commercially zoned property, especially within that area of the city, entirely for residential development. Also, there were some concerns expressed about the continued need for workforce housing, or really just housing at various price points that can be affordable to a greater segment of Waynesboro's citizens. So since that time, the applicant has made 2 changes to their original application to try and address those concerns. So I will go over those, but I did also want to note that a public hearing was held again at the Planning Commission on this amended request at last week's meeting, and the Planning Commission again voted to recommend approval of the amended request. Just to kind of remind everyone, the location of the property here along King Avenue, Hopeman is here, Food Lion, and the elementary school directly across the street. This was the original request to show the property kind of entirely developed as a residential townhouse development. It's just a little bit of a zoomed in version. So the amendments to the application. First, the first change is the applicant has reserved 5,000 square feet of office retail space to the proposed development. So it has roughly the same number of townhouse units at 79, but would have 5,000 square foot of office or retail space. So while not a lot, it does create a little bit more of a mixed-use development and reserves some of the highway business zoning specifically for business use. Secondly, the developer has offered to sell 4 of those townhouse units to remain affordable for a family of 4 that earns 80% of the area median income. And the way that they will do that is by working with the city and the Virginia statewide community land trust. And, so I wanted to give a little bit of information on that, but just to kind of put some context to what that 80% of area median income looks like. Currently, based on 2024 HUD data, a family of 4 making $71,900 would be at 80% of that area median income. And while I don't have the exact number, factoring in the land trust's kind of equation and a certain percent down payment, that would equate to a sale price of a little over $200,000. So certainly better prices than what we're seeing in the market currently. So as I mentioned, the amended proposal does still include approximately 79 townhouse units, but 4 of those would be sold to the Virginia statewide community land trust. And while land trusts have been around in the United States for some time and in Virginia, it's not something that we're very familiar with, so I wanted to kind of briefly talk about that model. First, I will just show the updated concept plan, again, mostly developed as residential townhomes, but there would be kind of up front here along King Avenue, this area for office and retail space. So what is the community land trust, and really how does it create kind of permanent affordability? So the eligible purchaser, that individual or family making 80% of area median income, they are purchasing the home, but they are leasing the land from the land trust. And it's a 99-year ground lease to kind of create that affordability and perpetuity. So essentially it's taking the land cost out of the transaction. Based on the ground lease, the purchaser of their home, they're able to build equity, but only in the house because that's only the portion that they own. And then when they resale, if they were ever to resale their property, they're limited to a resale value based on the land trust model. So the city would be working with the land trust. City would, potentially be helping to identify individuals based on other organizations within the area, but really relying on the Virginia statewide community land trust to kind of do the majority of the legwork in terms of kind of all the legal requirements that would be had. So a little bit about them. The statewide land trust was created in 2021. They are a 501c3 that works to create permanently affordable housing ownerships within Virginia. It is the first statewide land trust, and they are working with several other localities. It's kind of a big lift, especially a locality of our size, to prop up our own land trust, and this is the ability for us to utilize the statewide land trust for that model. So those are the specific changes to the request since you last heard it in June. It is scheduled for a public hearing this evening, and the applicant is here to address council.
Would you like to say a few words?
Good evening, members of council, Mrs. Mayor. My name is Lee Garrison. I am here to speak about the project. As Ms. Tate said, I was here several months ago and heard that there were concerns regarding the existing zoning of the property being business, getting rid of all of that and affordable housing. So I've tried to address both. With regard to the business, I think the 9 to 10 acres, all business, probably would be a tough sell further away from Hopeman when you have the existing land there on Hopeman. But I tried to do a mixed-use community. I'm really excited about the affordable housing, and honestly, you know, I've been in business for quite a few years, and I've heard affordable housing at different localities. How do you define affordable housing? And I don't know if I've ever been able to do it, and I don't know if any other localities have been able to do it to where everyone agrees. So the opportunity to kind of partner with the city and been there, done that, state land trust does excite me because they've got the policies and procedures in place and how to do things. And I know we'll have to figure it out, but I'm excited to make it work for the city. I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but can answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you. I should have opened the public hearing first, but I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Mayor, I just have one quick question, maybe for Leslie. Do you, or maybe Mr. Garrison, I'm sorry, you might know as well, but relative to the area median income, why is it based off area median income? Because, I mean, the Augusta County average median income is $20,000 higher than either the city of Waynesboro or the city of Stanton. So just kind of curious why we're including such a large geographic area into the average.
Yeah, so I think those numbers specifically came from the land trust. I'd have to get a little more clarification with them if like that's some kind of requirement they have.
I suspect it probably is.
Yeah,
it's just,
but yeah, so I'd have to ask them about that because the numbers did come from them. You know, we hope to create enough flexibility in this because we knew we didn't have it all figured out up front. That certainly we'd be working with Mr. Garrison as we moved forward, and the examples provided in that kind of a little over $200,000 number could certainly change depending on when we come on board. But that's something we could certainly look into.
okay, great, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding the COP? Okay, then I hereby open the public hearing. Are there any other speakers signed up? Okay. I hereby close the public hearing. Oops. Do I have a motion to, let me get on where I was. Do I have a motion to introduce the ordinance granting the conditional use permit allowing townhomes at 0 King Avenue?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shore. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Any discussion?
I just want to express, appreciation to Mr. Garrison for working with staff and really, leaning in. I feel like we've been heard, our community has been heard, and excited about the partnership and your flexibility. So thank you for that.
Okay. This ordinance will receive final consideration at the November 13th meeting. Thank you. Item 9 is to consider adopting a resolution of support for an application to the Virginia Department of Transportation Highway Safety Improvement Program. Ms. Tate.
So this is related to the Virginia Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP. The applications are currently open in this round. It is a yearly process. They're due on Thursday, and so staff plans to submit an application. But this program existed and then went away for several years, so I did want to provide just a little bit of history on it. It has been back, I guess this is the third year in a row. But so it's relatively low-cost treatments or transportation improvements, so different than what we apply for larger projects when we apply for Smart Scale, but they're targeted safety approaches, and they kind of fall within these different treatments. So one of them is high visibility backplates for your light signals, flashing yellow arrows, road diets, curve delineation is a treatment, and then also pedestrian crossing improvements are covered. So I just wanted to go over some of the past applications we've completed. We did the high visibility backplates and the flashing yellow arrows to kind of cover all signals within the city, and were awarded a little over $117,000 for that project through this program. We also put in an application 2 years ago for 15 intersections for pedestrian crossing improvements, and were awarded $825,420 for those 15 locations. Another application was put in which covered roughly 25 different pedestrian crossings. It also got lumped in with some additional warning signs and treatment for curb delineation outside of Basic City, and that was a little over, or a little under $3.5 million for those improvements. So we've been really successful with HSIP and applying every year. This year, we plan to put in strictly pedestrian improvements at 21 different locations. I am working with the VDOT provided consultant to finalize the final cost estimates. VDOT recommends that, each, a treatment at one location, the average is roughly $125,000. So we're working on what all might be able to fit into those pedestrian improvements. But we do have 21 different locations, and these come from, kind of a wide range of all of the comprehensive plans and planning efforts that the city has, from data and analysis showing where some of the higher crash data exists. It comes from working with our Safe Routes to School coordinator and other advisory committees to talk through some areas of concern where pedestrian improvements are encouraged. So these are the 21 different intersections that we plan to put in for applications this week. The resolution before you lists all of those locations, and this map just overlays those locations with city schools and parks to kind of get a feel of the different land uses within the area. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions from council? No? Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution supporting the HSIP application?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any discussion?
Ma'am, I'll just be abstaining as an employee of the Virginia Department of Transportation.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Abstain.
We have 4 ayes and 1 abstention. Item 10 is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing the city manager to submit an application for a grant from the Virginia Community Flood Preparedness Fund. Mr. McCormick.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. The fiscal year 2025 Stormwater Fund included the cost for stormwater consultants to review our 2006 Stormwater Capital Improvement Plan. As they began to undertake this process, they realized that the Community Flood Preparedness Fund grant could potentially share in those costs. This resolution just recommends and gives staff the authority to apply for that grant. The grant is anticipated to be about $200,000, somewhere between a 10 and a 15% match. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Are there any questions? Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution supporting the Community Flood Preparedness Grant application?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that passes 5-0. Item 11 is to consider authorizing the city manager to execute a land and water conservation fund grant agreement for improvements to Basic Park. Mr. Ham.
Yes, ma'am. So the Department of Parks and Recreation has been awarded a grant in the amount of $257,000 roughly to construct specific improvements at Basic City Park. More specifically, a restroom with a facility for storage, ADA sidewalks along the existing parking lot. Eventually, the Greenway Trailhead will be established there. Another big feature and attractive feature of this grant opportunity is some field improvements that would involve preparing a full-size football field with goalposts, team benches, and bleachers. There would also be ADA sidewalks and a concrete area for inclusive viewing of sports at that location. I would say ordinarily, the news that we've been awarded a grant of about $257,000 would be good news. What makes this a little bit tricky is that it falls outside of our normal budget cycle, so we're not able to we weren't able to anticipate and prepare for this, and I'm a little reluctant that we hold the opportunity. In fact, I wouldn't recommend that you do that, for concern that they would withdraw the award. So you may be familiar with this grant. About 18 months ago, Parks and Rec sought approval and council granted approval to apply for this project. At the time, it was an 80-20 match requirement rather than the current 50-50. And the scope of the project was a little smaller at the time. So I think this grant provides a welcome opportunity to improve some long-needed restroom facilities at the area. Additionally, improve some practice and perhaps ultimately game fields for our Little League football and for soccer, which currently, especially where football is concerned, we lack adequate field space for that league. And so I think staff could have solved about a $40,000 grant match opportunity within the operating budget. A $257,000 grant match opportunity, I think, requires some confirmation from council that you want to prioritize this project, acknowledge that we're outside the regular budget cycle, but acknowledge that, the successful work of the Parks and Rec and creating the opportunity to accomplish these much-needed improvements in that park.
Okay. Having served on the Waynesboro Quarterback Club, I'm certainly excited for an opportunity like this. We've practiced on the field and used porta potties, and so having a nice practice field with regular restrooms would be a welcome to those families, I'm sure. Are there any questions for Mr. Hamp? No? Okay, is there a motion to authorize the city manager to execute the grant agreement?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wood. Is there any discussion? I think everyone's kind of anxious about this one. Is there any discussion?
Amen, hallelujah.
Okay, yeah, no kidding. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that passes 5-0. Item 12 is citizen comment period.
Yes, Ms. Lisa Jeffers.
If you can please state your name and address for our records, please.
Sure. Lisa Jeffers, I'm the Director of Elections for the City of Waynesboro, 2570 Hermitage Road. And good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Councilman, and staff. And I've already stated that I'm the Director of Elections. I do appreciate you all addressing, because that's the reason that I'm here, is because of the current lawsuit filed in the Circuit Court of Waynesboro. And I feel like me being silent on this issue is agreement, and I'm not. I'm here to assure all citizens, all 16,400 that are registered, and the 1,207 that have voted by mail, and the 3,747 as of this afternoon that voted in person, their votes are safe, they're counted, or will be, they're secure. And we also hold logic and accuracy testing prior to every election. There were no issues with the equipment during the testing. We bought this equipment in July of 2023 at your grace. Thank you. And it is an equipment that's been used widely across the state. I got to backtrack on a statement you used that how you guys were elected. None of you were elected on this new voting equipment. Oops. But this is even better. And it is never, ever connected to the internet. And our early voting will continue through Saturday. 5 p.m. is the drop dead deadline. And I would also like to read to you the oath of office that I took. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that I'll faithfully and impartially discharge all the duties incumbent upon me according to the best of my ability. This is the oath that I have taken 9 times in the last 37 years. I don't take it lightly. I take it very seriously. There are many rewards. There are not many rewards in this job, but the ones that are extremely monumental, such as an eager 17-year-old that's registering for the first time and casting that ballot. And my election officials are clapping and screaming and shouting for that person, along with a 102-year-old that voted this afternoon that walks better than I do. Also helping military voters that are overseas and in harm's way, and I email them a ballot and I see it all come full circle, and that ballot comes back to me. That's a great, great joy in this job. Or the voter that has an emergency prior to the election, unforeseen, not their fault, and I have to use their family, their neighbors, or a good friend that hauls paperwork back and forth to a hospital or a rehab center for them to get to vote. And then there are relationships, and they're back behind me, and I'm not going to cry. Fantastic election officials in Waynesboro City should be extremely proud of these people. They work with me day in and day out, and that's a feat in itself. But they are awesome. They're fantastic. They're for 45 days for every election, and then they turn around and do it again on election day. They're Waynesboro's unsung heroes for sure. And they are also under an oath every day during early vote, because we print on demand. I'm sorry, I see the clock. And they have to prevent fraud, deceit in conducting the election. And they take that oath while working with the voters in the city, and the election officials is what makes this job so much enjoyable. I'm here to ensure every citizen of this city that your vote matters, it's going to count, it's safe and secure, and it will be certified.
Thank you, Lisa. And I did give you those extra seconds.
If there are some counseling services for a 17-year-old that I have at the house who will be 3 days short
Oh,
of being able to vote. I appreciate so close.
thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Lisa. That was appreciated comments. Okay, that brings us to item 13, which is correspondence, calendar, and comments from our city manager.
I don't have anything this evening.
Okay, well, Mr. Allen will be really excited. This will be your
I'm past excited right now.
four meetings left. This is the last. You have 3 after tonight. Would you like to make a
I'll
motion?
make the motion, we adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.